daughter of woman who has died 2 years after being doused in petrol and set on fire by her monster boyfriend in one of Britain's worst ever domestic violence cases, says he should now be tried for murder.
The mother of 4 who died in agony 2 years after her boyfriend doused her in petrol and set her alight during a petty squabble has been remembered as a big character and a lovely woman by her daughter, who says she wants the monster who did it now charged with her murder. Ellen Marshall, 43, suffered burns over 80 to 90% of the top half of her body in the sickening attack on April 22, 2021, in her flat in Skegness, Lincolnshire. She was initially only given a 50% chance of surviving as she struggled to breathe unaided, but she clung to life until she died on March 11 in Nottingham City Hospital. Her daughter Paige Clark, 25, paid tribute to her in a Facebook post saying, "No more pain and suffering now, Mum." Paige's message, decorated with heart emojis, added, "Sleep well and I will see you soon. I love you." In an interview with Mail Online, she added, "I am still processing the thought of not having my mum around anymore, and I am supporting my siblings in dealing with it. We knew it was going to shorten her life expectancy, but we did not think it would be this quick. In some ways it has come out of the blue because she would get poorly and they'd think she wouldn't make it and then she would bounce back. She was essentially in hospital ever since it happened. She was in Birmingham, then Nottingham, and then in a care home for a few months, but then came back to Nottingham City Hospital just before Christmas." Paige, who is organizing her mother's funeral, described how Ms. Marshall would slip in and out of consciousness and struggled to breathe for herself. She said, "She could talk, but when she was really poorly she was unresponsive most of the time." Ms. Marshall's partner Lee Pittman, 43, admitted grievous bodily harm with intent at Lincoln Crown Court and was jailed for 17 years and 10 months last March. He was given an extended sentence, meaning he will spend an extra 4 years on license after his release. Paige is now calling for him to be charged with murder if tests prove her mother's death was as a result of her burn injuries. She said, "I would have thought it was obvious that the monster who did this to my mum should now stand trial for murder and serve a life sentence. We have to wait for the autopsy, but this is what we would like to happen." Paige of Sutton in Ashfield, Nottinghamshire, added, "I am going to miss her. She was very outspoken and would light up a room when she walked in. She would always let you know how she felt about you." Ms. Marshall's sister Linda added, "Ellen was very bubbly. You'd always know she was around and where you stood with her. She was a big character and leaves a big hole in our lives." Her former partner and father of her children, Alan Clark, said, "I know the police are looking into bringing a bigger charge. He deserves it. It has been really hard for the children with her being in hospital over the past 2 years." Ms. Marshall's son Tim Clark, 21, added in a Facebook post, "R.I.P. Mum. I'm going to miss you. Love you loads." Police, who described the attack on Ms. Marshall as one of the worst cases of domestic violence they had seen, are waiting for post-mortem results to establish how she died. Ms. Marshall, who had alcohol issues, was originally from Nottingham, but moved to Skegness around 7 years ago, leaving her teenage children with their father in Sutton and Ashfield. She lived in a succession of flats, guest houses and houses of multiple occupation, as well as Salvation Army accommodation in the seaside town. One of her former landlords, who asked not to be named, said, "She was a lovely lady, but she was very troubled and had issues. She was a recovering alcoholic, but relapsed and started drinking again. I think that I gave her somewhere to live 3 times. She was always nice to me and she paid her rent. But there were definitely issues with her drinking. I know she had to get away from Nottingham, but I don't really know why. She had a couple of relationships when I knew her. When she left my place, she moved in with a boyfriend and I think she went downhill. I think it was towards the end when she started to go down the wrong roads again. She split up with a boyfriend I knew she had, and she must have then got together with the guy who later burned her. I don't know anything about him. I heard about the attacker on the news. It sounded awful, and I am sad that she has now died." Ms. Marshall was set ablaze at around 10:30 p.m. as she sat in an armchair in her ground floor flat in a house shared with other tenants in Skegness. The property has since been converted into a family home. A local resident said, "It was just awful. We didn't realize anything was wrong until we saw firefighters, police and an ambulance in the road." Pittman poured petrol over her from a jerrycan following an argument before using a lighter to ignite it. He fled on his bike and left her for dead after pouring 2 bowls of water over her. Firefighters heard gurgling noises when they arrived at the flat and found Ms. Marshall lying on the living room floor with her hair burned off and her facial features difficult to recognize. She was still conscious and managed to give her name, but claimed the injuries she had suffered were self-inflicted. Ms. Marshall was taken to Boston Pilgrim Hospital and underwent initial surgery for 12 hours for burns to her face, neck, abdomen, chest and limbs. She also lost some of her fingers and had severe damage to her eyes. Ms. Marshall was transferred to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham for specialist treatment for catastrophic and life-changing burns. Pittman was arrested at his mother's house where he was found covered in soot and needed treatment for burns to himself. His sentencing hearing was told that he had made a previous threat to set her alight and had kept the petrol at his flat. He told police he had been arguing with his then-girlfriend for months and that they were both dependent on alcohol. Pittman claimed he had bought the petrol for his strimmer, and only poured it over her lap to scare her. He made out that he had been messing around with his lighter and did not mean to burn her. The court heard last year how Ms. Marshall was still in hospital and could only walk a few steps at a time with a frame. Specialists said at the time that they hoped would survive, but would continue to need 24-hour care if she was discharged from hospital. Judge Simon Hurst told Pittman, "Her injuries are irreversible and she will never be able to return to her former life. It is difficult to think of a crueler crime than setting someone alight. You used a highly dangerous weapon with the use of fire and an accelerant." Dennis Bandimquat said after the hearing, "This is such a tragic incident that has left Helen with life-changing injuries. She is likely not to ever make a full recovery. I hope this sentence will bring some closure to the family." A statement by Lincolnshire police this week said, "Helen Marshall's passing has been brought to our attention, which is a dreadful loss. The coroner is currently in charge of the inquiry, and we are working together with both of them and the Crown Prosecution Service in order to carry out an autopsy." Paul Smith, the area coroner for Lincolnshire, opened an inquest into her death this week. He said the precise cause of Ms. Marshall's death had not yet been revealed and adjourned the inquest until September 10.